All right, guys, I am going to take you through a couple of different ways to set up band pull-ups or assisted pull-ups. A lot of people can't do conventional pull-ups the first day that they walk into a gym. There are alternatives if you're in a commercial gym. You've got cable pull-downs, and you often would find balanced machines that will allow you to emulate the pull-up motion. If you're in a more restricted equipment setting, for example, in our gym, all we have are squat racks and benches. We don't have cables, we don't have pulleys, we don't have access to that sort of stuff, so we've got to be a bit more creative. One of the more common ways to get around this is to use bands to assist the exercise. Now, there are two different ways you can attach them to the squat rack or the pull-up bar, depending on what we want to accomplish with it, so I'll walk you through the ones that we do. We tend to do this first one probably 90% of the time, where you can see on our squat racks, instead of the conventional single set of J-hooks, we've got pegs that just run up and down the length of the rack. Now, regardless of what type of rack you have, all you would do is you would set the J-hooks just like if you were doing a squat. You'd probably want to have them set depending on how tall you are. If I'm fairly tall, I want to have them set a decent space away from the rack so that I've got room to execute my pull-up. If I'm fairly short, I want to set them a little higher because I don't want to lose the help from the band at the top. So for example, on this rack, when I squat, I have it set here. So when I'm doing my pull-up, I'm going to set it a little bit lower than that. So I'm going to attach the band. I'm just stringing it across the J-hooks. Now, I tend to just leave it right in the middle. I don't like to shove the bands right up against the edge of anything. I don't want the bands rubbing on the metal parts, especially depending on what your hook setup looks like. So to make sure that the bands don't fray over time, we just put them right in the middle. But the benefit to this is that it's a little bit more customizable based on your height. I do think it's also easier to use multiple bands if you're somebody who has a fairly low level of pull-up strength and you need to use multiple bands. I like this style. The other thing that I do think it helps is it doesn't force you to try to control as much through the core. So, which can be a good or a bad thing. If we simply want to train the back and we want to be a bit more stable, I like this setup. So I've got a band attached. Now it's just sort of treating the squat rack like an adult jungle gym. We just have to kind of climb up and get into place. You can use this regardless of the different types of pull-up grips that you may use. You can see our pull-up handles are like a monkey bar setup, but it doesn't matter your grip. So let's pretend like we're gonna do just a regular wide grip pull-up. So I just need to step in. I would not do your knees. I would only do this with your feet. I've seen people do it with the knees. I think getting in and out, the dismount gets really, really ugly. So I would recommend just setting it up like this. Just get in. So I want to have the band placed low enough that I'm not getting excess help at the top, but it needs to be high enough that I still get some help at the top. So just drawing up. You see my feet never leave the band. The band does not go completely flat at the top of the pull-up, so it's still contributing all the way through. Now, I realize that somebody in the comments will probably point out that you typically want not so much help from the bottom. That's true. The band helps more at the bottom and less at the top as the band returns to its original position. The problem with a pull-up is that people tend to be a little stronger at the bottom and weaker at the top. So it's like the contribution of help is a little ass backwards. However, if this is all you have access to, it's still a good choice. You know, it's not the optimal choice if we have access to other things, if we have access to pull downs or pulley systems, but we can still make it work for sure. So this is the base way that we can set this up. Again, we've got more flexibility for setting up on our heights. The other way that I think is probably a little bit more common is to attach the band to the pull-up bar itself. So it would look something like this. You would feed the band over the bar, pull one end through the other, so we get here. Now the challenge I find with this is twofold. So one, depending on the band or number of bands you're using, again, if you're not super strong at the pull-up, if you have to use two different bands, trying to make sure you feed your foot through both bands at the same time, to me, becomes kind of risky territory. And then you do also have to really account for the fact that you will start swinging now on here. And again, depending on what your strength is, if you're close to doing full pull-ups, that's not a bad thing. But if this is a completely new exercise to you, I don't probably want myself swinging back and forth because I need to worry about learning how to do the pull-up. I also don't like how much you've got to climb up just to get your foot into it, but that's just more of a personal preference thing. So if we're doing it this way, you can put one or both feet in it. Frankly, I think it's fine just leaving one in, and then I can pull up and come down. But again, I don't have stability provided by the band attached to the rack anymore. So you can see myself, I'm kind of swaying a little bit, so I really have to focus on executing control. And then when you're done, again, step out. Now, there are like a million YouTube fail videos where someone does a pull-up like this. The band slides off their feet and either one hits them in the face, or two, it slaps up between the legs and hits them in spots that are equally as unpleasant. So make sure you recognize that going into it, that if either of those things don't sound like a good time to you, this might not be the variation that I would use. But this is an alternative way to set up. Like I said, especially if you're closer to being able to do a conventional pull-up, this is probably a decent progression. If it's new, I'd probably avoid it. But if this is something that you're just not sure how to set it up, here's how you do it. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. If you got questions, throw them in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you guys next time.